Hey, I wanted to let you guys know that I have a free download offer available now. I'll put the link in the description. Go to my blog, sign up for my VIP newsletter, and I will send you your free download code to get my accessories for DSLRs video. 2.5 hours of everything you want to know about accessories. So what is all this buzz about the Panasonic GH4? If you haven't heard, it's probably about the fact that it shoots in 4K video. Now, I've been shooting videos for a long time, and I can honestly tell you it is impressive. It has variable frame rates, it has peaking focus, it does zoom focusing for 1080. It is really, it's really impressive. If you haven't seen some of the comparison videos, definitely check out Luke Newman's comparison video. I know my buddy Dave Degdale is going to be posting one soon. Check out the video features and the comparisons, and you'll see that the quality of video coming out of the GH4 is impressive. Most of the questions that I've been getting revolve around how does the GH4 do as a stills camera? So I decided to put it up head-to-head against the best stills camera that I have in my collection, which is the 5D Mark III. And this is your quick comparison between those two cameras. In my first test, I decided to look at portraits. Now, a micro four thirds camera is a much smaller sensor than a full frame sensor, and it has a multiplication factor of 2x on whichever lens that you're using. So if I had a 24-70 lens on my 5D Mark III, I would be using a 12-35 lens on the G4. And initially, on the back monitor, I'll be honest with you, I was not impressed with the GH4. Its monitor sort of looks like a digitally cell phone. When I brought those images home, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought the portraits looked really good. There are some slight differences. I don't think most people would notice it, but a portrait photographer is going to see these things. The depth of field was more shallow, obviously, on the full frame camera. Very, very slight better colors coming out of the 5D Mark III. That said, the GH4 was impressive, and I think that if you get better glass on it, there's some Voigtlander 0.95 aperture lenses that are just really wide aperture. You're going to get some really shallow depths of field. If the 5D Mark III is an A for portraits, I would give the GH4 a B to a B+ range. It did very well. Second test that I did was for sports shooting. And now I've seen some reviews and I've read some reports that kind of claim that the GH4 is the be-all, do-all replacement for, DSLRs when it comes to sports shooting. That is just not what I'm seeing. I did 2 sets of tests for sports shooting, and there were 3 things that I noticed that kind of really bothered me. The first thing was that when you're in a burst mode, so if you're firing up like that, and you rack the zoom ring, all of the shots are going to drop focus immediately. Now, DSLRs also run into the same issue when you rack the zoom ring. They will occasionally drop a frame or two when bursting, but I show you these images here so you can see that coming and going away from the camera while zooming, the GH4 starts to struggle in its burst mode. I found that the side-to-side action, it was much better. The second thing was that the GH4 is rated for 12 frames per second, but that only applies to the AFS, which is the single servo mode, for non-moving subjects. The servo focus mode fires at 7 frames per second. I decided to test the focusing modes with burst, and sure enough, autofocus single dropped many more frames than the autofocus continuous. Again, coming and going away from the camera is where it struggles. The GH4 also has a super high burst that allows for 40 frames per second when using an electronic shutter, but the image size here is reduced down to 4 megapixels. So for sports shooting, it's really closer to 7 frames per second, not 12. And the third thing that I saw was the depth of field, is that when you're using wider focal length lenses on a micro four thirds camera, that depth of field, just like in the portraits, you're not going to get these super buttery backgrounds unless you use a very wide aperture. The thing that makes the focusing system so awesome in a DSLR is that you have light coming through the lens, it hits the mirror, and some of that light is reflected down onto a focusing array that measures real light coming through the lens in real time. And that is why the focusing systems in DSLRs are so awesome. The GH4 is it is the best mirrorless camera that I've seen and used for shooting sports. But that said, it is nowhere in the ballpark of a DSLR camera for sport shooters. So if you primarily shoot birds, fast-moving subjects, high burst rates are important to you, you're going to want to stick with your DSLR. In my third test, I looked at ISO noise performance. I simply took pictures of a color chart, bumped up the ISO, bumped up the shutter speed, and what I saw was at about an ISO of 1600, the greens and the grays start to show noticeable noise on the GH4. The 5D Mark III looked really good, even through 6400. So for stills, just remember that 1600 probably going to be your limit on the GH4. I also did a dynamic range test. The GH4 has a 1 exposure value higher dynamic range rating, but side by side in a situation where I had very bright highlights and very dark shadows, I really couldn't see the difference consistently. It was very comparable to the 5D Mark III. There is also a curve setting that will allow you to squeeze out more details out of your shadows, but this will only apply to JPEGs and not the RAW files. Now, there were some other things that I noticed about the camera. On some occasions, there was almost like a color matting in very dark tones. But for the most part, the GH4 is a very good camera. So if you are a hybrid shooter, you do video and some other kind of photography, if you do video and portraits, take a look at it. If you do video and sports shooting and you make a lot of your money on sports shooting, probably going to be better to stick with your DSLR. I think hikers, people who travel a lot, are going to love the camera. It's smaller, it's lighter, it's compact. I mean, look at this thing. This is a 12 to 35 lens, which is a 24 to 70 if you include the crop factor, and it's teeny tiny, doesn't draw a lot of attention, very impressive. In fact, after one day of testing, I decided I needed to get a GH4 and I went out and bought one. I'm very excited about it. In any event, that is your quick comparison of the GH4 and how it compares to the Canon 5D Mark III in terms of being a photography camera. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. If you found this video helpful, you might want to check out my crash course videos on the GH4 or the Canon 5D Mark III. I'll teach you the basics and help you shoot like a pro in no time. You can order it from the following link.